Hi, welcome to the Home Expo Podcast. My name is Tammie Hartman, and our podcast brings trusted home improvement specialists and homeowners together to explore the latest in home design and renovations. This episode dives into how thoughtful architectural design can transform daily living. You'll learn how custom homes can reflect your lifestyle, values, and aspirations. We have two guests today. The first guest is David Bruce Lee. David holds a Master of Urban Design from the City College of New York and a Bachelor of Architecture from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. With more than 14 years of professional experience in custom homes, towers, big thing, and other building types, he is a licensed architect in California, Nevada, Florida, and New York. His work has been exhibited in institutions such as the Museum of the City of New York, and he has taught architecture at the university level. We also have Marina Bourderonnet. Marina is a French architect with a Bachelor of Architecture from, would you like to say the name of your school?
Yeah, it's from l'École nationale d'architecture de Paris-Val de Seine.
Thank you.
It's a long one.
Marina has also studied sculpture and art and worked in New York City and Paris. She has 14 years of experience designing beachfront homes, mid-rise condos, restaurants, and health facilities, and is a registered architect in New York and a lead green associate. Together, David and Marina co-founded Fame Architect and Design, a partnership specializing in custom modern residences, and the co-host of the Top 10 podcast, The Second Studio. Their approach emphasizes the deep connection between lifestyle and architecture using unique client questionnaires and even drawing inspiration from music to create spaces that reflect each client's personalities. I know for me in my home improvement shows, I've noticed that styles in music greatly reflect the lifestyle of the person. I've noticed that a lot in a lot of the shows and the homeowners that I've talked to. So seeing that you take music as inspiration for your architecture is really, really important. So let's just dive into asking some questions. And I know that more and more people are designing their own homes because the cookie cutter way of building, like these track homes, they're all the same. Maybe the plans are upside down or backwards. And so it's the same plan, just situated on land. And I noticed that more and more people are using their houses more as function, using more space that is available, not having a lot of empty space in their home, and really maybe downsizing or just really wanting to make more use of the space that they're purchasing. So what do you think are why some custom architecture matters in a market filled with off-the-shelf plans? Like, what advantages do homeowners have for having a custom home designed by a professional architect?
It's a great question. I mean, I think to each their own. And look, the reality is that for every property owner, there's dozens of variables they have to consider when they're about to embark on a project. And the biggest question, of course, whether or not they even do the project. But even if they decide to do, is it custom? Is it a tract house or a spec house? Is it what contractor, what architect, what style, all of these things? How long am I going to live there for and keep the property? I think the biggest value one gains from a custom residential approach is value, or is quality, rather.
Right.
It's a quality of living and lifestyle that will be, exponentially higher when it's a custom house for somebody and specifically, as opposed to being a generic floor plan and a generic architecture and interiors. I also think that it is the best way to bring more value to the property itself, because to your point, the challenge with a lot of off-the-shelf designs, there's many, but one of them is whether or not that floor plan and that architecture is really the best solution for that specific site. Now, if we're talking about a standard suburban neighborhood and all the lots are the same, and maybe a floor can be standardized across all these different lots. That's one situation. But a lot of times, even in those contexts, every lot is a little bit different because of the sun, the wind, the orientation, the views, the neighbors you have around you, the foliage, the greenery. So one of our biggest roles as an architect in creating good architecture is to be site specific and client specific. And you really only get a very appropriate response in the form of architecture if you're doing something custom, or at least you're thinking about all these variables and the context that I've described. And that's so we have an off-the-shelf pre-designed house for the Pacific Palisades as a fire rebuild. And a lot of people have asked us, can we take that house and plop it down on my site? And the answer sometimes is, your property is actually much bigger than what we designed for. So yes, we could, but I would actually advise against it because you won't be getting the most out of the property for yourself and also from a resale standpoint.
I think it's also like, if we kind of like make the comparison with fashion, if you buy a shirt that's one size fit all, right? It's going to fit differently every person who's going to try the shirt. And sometimes, if you're a generic person for that, standard size, it might fit you fine. And if you're like really tall or really short or really wide or really skinny, like that shirt is going to not fit you properly. So I think the custom home approach is kind of that, like, the cookie cutter has kind of a let's say a bad connotation to the word, but I feel like it satisfies a lot of people. Not everyone wants to have a custom home. Not everyone needs a custom home, and that's totally fine. But for people who want a bit more say in what they want to live in and how they want to live, that's where the custom home comes into play. And that's where, all of the conversation we have with our clients really inform what the house wants to be based on who they are, how they live, how they're planning on living or aging, or, all of those questions. And oftentimes when we design custom homes, it's not just for the now, it's for now and later and the different phases of life. And we can think about that as we, start from zero. But if you start with a house that's been designed for you, it's kind of it. Like, you don't really have, much choices. I think there is also different ways to engage in customizing your home, or, if that makes sense. Ideally, you would start from scratch, right? You would design the home from zero and then do the full thing. And that's not available for everybody. But a kind of a half step to do that is when people do home remodels and they hire designers and architects. That's an easy way to dial into making the home more custom for you without, doing the whole thing. And sometimes
those are harder.
Sometimes those are hard because if people bought a home that really wasn't laid out in the plan to work for them, it's a lot more work than if we had started from a blank page. So those could also be tricky. And I think people just need to think about what they want before they purchase a home and they move into it, to make sure they don't have to jump from one end to the other in the middle of living in the house.
Yeah, I've noticed that more and more people are working from home. So when you say, oh yeah, we have a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, it's not really 4 bedrooms. It's more like 3 bedrooms and an office. Yeah. And more people they're building ADUs in their backyard to, like you said, for the future, for aging in place, or to have these compounds of family coming to live together, because housing is just so expensive now that some people are even buying smaller houses that they can expand on because it's cheaper or less expensive to buy a smaller house and build it out than it is to just buy a bigger house. I've seen it happen all around Sacramento. I mean, my friends bought a house and now they're blowing out the back side of the house and the side of the house. I'm like, why? but they need that extra space. Yeah. And they're building an ADU in the backyard, which is amazing and it looks fabulous. But I've seen the architects and her plans, and it's very intricate. And I'm not a math person. I'm sure a lot of homeowners are not. So I really give you guys kudos for being able to put these visions on paper and how people really customize their space, like you said, that works with their lifestyle. Now, what about sustainability and smart tech? Like connecting the Home Expo audience and talking about eco-friendly materials, energy-efficient design, smart home technologies. What kind of materials have you seen come into play when it comes to finding materials for these new builds? Or is that something that you do, or you just come up with the plans? How does that work?
That's a really good question. So, on the topic of how we work in relation to the materials, so this varies depending on the architecture office. And that's taking a step back. That's one of the challenges, I think, for homeowners and property owners is that you pick up the phone, you call 10 architects, they all actually practice differently and offer different levels of services and are involved in different levels. In our case, we're very, very holistic, comprehensive, and detailed. So, many times we are the ones to source the specific product and then forward that link to the GC and say, the contractor, and say, this is the product we're thinking of using. And then the general contractor will say, okay, cool. I have some other similar products that maybe you haven't heard of that might be nicer, a better price point, whatever else. And so a lot of times for us, it's not just the plans, but we're specifying everything in the entire project, including, appliances and everything else. But there is that room for collaboration with the general contractor who has their own source of database and knowledge. With, I think, building in a more eco-friendly manner, I have to say it's about time.
Yes, definitely.
It's interesting because within our profession, amongst the closed circle of architects, we've all known that buildings contribute a lot to CO2 emissions specifically and have a huge presence in this conversation of sustainability in the broader scope.
Right.
But it takes a long time for some of these things to become trendy or popular, let's say, which they need to be to gain momentum. So there's a lot of that. I think, when it comes to wood products like flooring and siding and whatever else, it's not just a matter of, it's a question of how the wood is sourced and where the company is sourcing it from. So we do our best to, when we come across a new company for wood flooring or for metal siding or whatever else, it's like, how are you sourcing this material? Where are you getting it from? What is the import export like? Because the idea of a sustainable material is not as simple as one might think. There's a lot of investigation that's to go on to see, like, is it properly sustainable? One of the worst materials for sustainability reasons is concrete, which I kind of hate to say because I love concrete, but the manufacturing, the creation of it is super intensive. And now the last 2 to 5 years, there's been more and more developments in alternate forms of concrete that have far less of a negative impact on the environment. So that's a kind of a long roundabout answer, but I think it's catching on as a trend, let's say, and that allows us also to propose these things much more easily to clients who in the past were not as aware of the topic. And so then it becomes a much harder pitch to say, hey, you could spend 10% extra and this material is sustainable and has these health benefits. 10 years ago, people were like, well, I'm not interested in that because it's not really a thing, or wasn't as much of a thing, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, we had a guest on our show that talked about the toxins in the home and having sustainable products and materials to use in the home. It might be a little bit more expensive, but when you weigh out the pros and cons of our health, I mean, our health is priceless. And we would spend much more time and money when we're sick if we would just spend the extra 10%, like you said, in sustainable materials. So
yeah, I mean, building sickness syndrome is a real thing. And, these days, I'll give one specific example. Like these days, when we design a house and we build a house, we want that house to be fully sealed. So the idea X years ago was, we opened the window to get fresh air. If you're living in the middle of the forest, that's fantastic. But in a lot of more urban environments, the air quality outside is maybe not the greatest. So actually it's the opposite. We want to seal the house, and then we have ERVs and other mechanical systems to mechanically bring in, filter, and then bring in fresh air. And that is something that we're seeing gain a lot more traction. And it's a bit of a new adjustment for some folks because they think they just open all the windows to get fresh air. But really what you want to bring in is clean filtered air through an ERV system. And, the list of things we can do in building practices to make a house more sustainable and healthy is so long. Even, it extends to the type of glue that we're using to secure wood flooring. We're using the typical glue that's toxic and releases VOCs, or we're going to spend another $10, $15 per bucket of glue to have something that doesn't have those, VOCs in them.
Yeah, I would much rather spend that extra $10.
It might be more than $10 to be fair, but the point stands.
Right. But I mean, even if it's, less than the price of a pizza, why not? Right.
Pizza in LA is expensive. So
I think the other I think the other aspect of sustainability too is the construction of homes and remodeling of homes. There's a lot of debris, right? A lot of things that just get put in and trashed and remodeled and all of that. And the amount of waste that comes from the construction industry is huge. That's also something that we're trying to be very mindful of when we design or we take on projects is, okay, if it's a remodel, how much can we reuse from the existing? How much can we keep? Is there any material that we can salvage and put somewhere else? And when our clients make decisions on, let's say, the finished materials, we want them to feel good about it and sure about it and not, go with the trend and in 5 years rip it all out and do it again because it's extremely wasteful. It's wasteful of their money, of resources, of their time. And I think we would rather go the timeless route. For me, a home that is timeless is sustainable because it is something that would just carry through time, potentially through different generation or ownership and remain. And I think we can go with the fancy new technology of materials, but we could also just think a little bit more basic picture and, longer term. And that's also a sustainable way of thinking.
Yeah. And I noticed that there are more furniture flippers on YouTube where instead of, they actually go to the thrift store, buy a piece of furniture and maybe have to use some toxic chemicals to get the old paint off. Then they refinish it with beautiful stained wood or non-toxic paint and resell it. So it just saved it from going into the dumpster. The same thing with people updating and upgrading their bathrooms and kitchens. Instead of ripping out what they have, they're just using what they have. And with more and more paint products that are coming out that are non-toxic, I mean, just painting your cabinets is enough to update it or changing the knobs. So I'm noticing that there's a lot more refurbishing and using kind of what we have instead of adding more stuff to the dump is becoming more of a trend as well. A lot of DIYers came out of the pandemic repurposing and sewing and things like that I think that it hit the creative side of homeowners where it's like, well, what else can we do? We want to upgrade it. Well, paint it or add a piece of wood and it's not as toxic. So you're right. Being able to reuse what you have when you're doing a renovation is really important. And I think more and more homeowners are becoming more aware of that and spending their money elsewhere and making bigger spaces or an extra space rather than just spending money on a new kitchen or a new bathroom, for instance.
Yeah. So. It's a really good point because I think earlier we were talking about a custom house versus a tract house. And sort of we could also say do you hire an architect or do you not hire an architect? But I think a good architect, and in the case of how we practice, especially even for new builds, but especially for remodels, is to try to be efficient with the resources we have. Resources oftentimes just means money, but other resources as well, right? Time, materials, whatever else. And we try to, in the remodels, take a much more surgical approach to what we're doing. So rather than coming in saying, well, we're architects and you've given me this brief of what you want to achieve and the problems you're trying to solve, client, and our solution is to rip out half the house and build the other half completely brand new. A lot of times there's a lot of more creative ways that require less work on our side and less construction money on the client's side to solve the same problem. And I think that's also one of the strengths that we've seen for us and the benefits we bring our clients is that because we're both an architecture and interiors practice, we can look at a problem through both lenses and say, you know what, to solve the problem you've outlined, you actually don't need to build this big thing or do this major work. We can do it, like you said, we can reuse something, do something smart that's going to get to the answer and do pay us less.
Yeah, I mean, everybody loves to make money, but when you're conscious about the people that you work with, I think that that's more valuable than getting a paycheck
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
creating those connections. You mentioned that you draw your inspirations through music, and I wanted to find out, can you share how music composition and other arts influence your creative process? Like what kind of music really gets your creative juices flowing? Do you listen to like speed metal or chanting?
I should try listening to speed metal and
Yeah, I
chanting.
mean,
Maybe our work would change overnight.
yeah, I tried that today, actually.
Um, it's an interesting question. I'll answer. I mean, you have a background in different arts than I do. I'll answer the bit about music though. So, I grew up playing an instrument for a long time. That was actually my first passion before architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a pretty intimate relationship in performance and what it feels like and being parts of being a soloist, being part of a small ensemble, a big ensemble, a big group. Um, to be honest, I've actually struggled to try and put words into how all of that impacts my design thinking and approach. But I will say that formally, there's a strong relationship between music and then architecture. The idea that architecture we're creating solids and voids, moments of silence, moments of crescendo, moments of climax, moments of peaceness. A lot of these words are shared between the industries. Rhythm, harmony, balance, things like this. I think for me, it's a much more intuitive aspect to how I work.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to try and put words to it, I would say when I'm looking at a design that we're working on, I tend to critique it as if it were a piece of music. And does it have what I would normally see in a piece of music to have it feel right and to have it resonate? And
Mm-hmm.
that's through the lens I see it. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense to people, but
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how I feel about it. And it also extends to, frankly, a first person experience of the architecture that we're creating. Is it fluid? Is it choppy? Are there
Mm-hmm.
moments of expansion and compression like we would find in music? Is there playfulness? All of these things kind of come into the fold. It also means, consequently, sometimes I'm explaining stuff and other people are like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, the big crescendo. We need a crescendo thing.
So it's like a symphony in the kitchen, right? You have your families that cook together. So you've got somebody who's watching the sauce on the stove. You've got little Johnny at the kitchen table chopping, or you've got grandma baking a pie in the oven. And so it's this symphony of how everybody works together. The same thing in a kitchen with a restaurant. You have the main chef, you have the sous chef, you have the waiters and the waitresses. And so it is kind of like a symphony where your space has to be set up for that symphony to happen. Is that kind of like an explanation of how this creative musical mind of yours works?
That's definitely a big part of it. I mean, I think initially I was thinking more formally, just the sculpture of architecture should present
Mm.
itself in a certain manner. But it's absolutely true when you overlay perhaps the most important part of it, which is how the spaces are used. That is
Mm-hmm.
another set of criteria that we are constantly thinking about.
We think a lot, like in parallel to music, like the flow, right? So the rhythm, the actors of the set, if we look at a room, like who's the main actor? In the kitchen, it might be the range or the hood, and then everyone else is kind of like background actor or like role one, role two. We think about the spaces very much in three dimension in our head, but in terms of volumes and light and darkness, but also as more of a sensible space, right? So is it quiet? Is it loud? Is it dark? Is it intimate? What view are we going to have? Well, mentally walking through the project as we're designing it and envision what do these spaces want to feel like. And I think music is a good analogy because you feel music, right? You have an emotional, physical reaction to any piece of music. If you like it or if you don't like it, your body would react to it. And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve with architecture, is to make sure that you have a reaction. I think the worst case is if you enter a home and you have no reaction, your body is just quiet. then I think that's not a good sign. Like, something's not there. Like the soul of the home is
poetry of
not
space.
present.
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing that. I know that, when I go to my mom's house, it's that sense of, oh my gosh, it's my mom's house. And I can tell that she just cooked something. So it's like that, or you go to a friend's house and it's just that love and support of seeing your friends or your family. So yeah, I totally get that. A vibe of a space is so important. It's so important. So what advice could you have for homeowners who are looking to either renovate or have a new build project? How do they choose an architect or set a budget? And how can they communicate effectively with you?
It's like an 8-hour conversation.
Well, I mean, you just mentioned that you're building things for the Palisades fires. I mean, I mean, I'm sure that some of the homes aren't completely burned to the ground. I mean, there's some buildings that can be salvaged. So would it make sense to just bulldoze it and start from scratch, or should they try and rebuild with what they have, for instance?
So with the Palisades specifically, all of the projects and homeowners and clients and potential clients we've been exposed to are all brand new houses. The ones that survived the fires are undergoing remediation, which is, I'm sure, going to be a lengthy process, rather. Right. So most of the Palisades is new construction, but I think for clients who are just starting off, doing one's own homework and research is a great idea. I think also, let's assume that they managed to phone, call, or email a good architect. Which is, it's a whole question of how you find a good architect, but let's assume they get like that far. Like us, yeah.
Like us?
Then what I would do is use that person as a resource in the very beginning. And so this is actually what we do very often for new clients that sometimes we end up working with and sometimes we don't work with them, and it's totally fine. So just give them information and say, okay, here are the things I would look out for and think about. The one of which I've seen more and more recently is that there's and this is specific, but there tends to be an over focus, let's say, on just the construction cost of a house, which is fair because the construction cost is the biggest part of it. But when you're doing a custom house, you still have this varies depending on the quality of the house and the complexity, but let's just ballpark and say 20% of that construction cost to 25% of the construction cost will be on top of the construction costs, and that's for what we call the soft costs, which is for the architect, the engineer, the interiors person, the lighting designer, the HVAC, the permitting, all these other people. Right. So a lot of folks, when they're talking about their new project, are like, I have a construction budget of $1.5 billion. Mm-hmm. And I say to them, okay, well, what's your total project budget? Oh, it's 1.5. Well, if it's 1.5 is your total, then I don't know what the math is on that, but your construction cost is more like 1.2 or something to that degree, which is a significant difference. Right. So that's something I would look out for. I think also, and maybe this is more of my personal gripe on things, I think there tends to be a way too much emphasis by homeowners on permitting. I think it's because everyone hears amongst their neighbors and families and friends headaches and nightmares with permitting. That for sure does take place. But look, the reality is if you're doing everything in the project by right, meaning you're sticking to the planning and building codes, which is the case for most properties, and you're not in like the coastal zone, and you have a good architect, the permitting is going to be what it's going to be. And so I think when people are selecting their architects and figuring out, what to do, they worry too much about that. The relationship with an architect is going to last 2 to 3 years. And the permitting work, to give a reference on our side, is like 1.5% of our work that we do.
And the thing too is with the permitting is that it really depends who's going to check your plans and your application. And we can't predict that, So we have projects where we're doing just a 500 square foot ADU and we have the worst plan checker ever. So it's taking 3 times more than it does on reviewing a brand new construction home of 400 square feet, 4,000 square feet.
Right.
So it really depends. You just got to do what you have to do. Make sure you take care of the plan check correction timely and responsively and get it out. And it's not because permit goes in that everything else stops. Like when the permit drawings are filed and we're waiting to find out, on our end, we're still working on a bunch of other things because, as you know, there is thousands of decisions and things that need to be designed and decided on projects. So it's about, looking at the overall schedule and making sure we're using our time efficiently to make it happen.
Yeah. I think also one of the big things that clients can keep in mind is understanding specifically what services they're getting from the architect or designer or whoever they're interviewing to hire. Like I said earlier, if you call 10 architects, they're all practiced differently. It's absolutely true, especially when it comes to the interiors and specifications and, things like construction documents and construction administration. There's a whole list of services that a very comprehensive, I would say, high-level architect will provide on every project, no questions, because it's necessary to have it be delivered on time, on budget, as best as possible at high quality. Right. A lot of architects, more so these days, will just chop out a bunch of all that stuff and say, hey, my fee is only 60% of this other architect you're speaking with. And if that's the case, if you're talking to two architects and one architect is like half the price, it's not because they're just half the price. They're probably cutting out half of the services. Right. And so that ends up being a problem because there is not that transparency. There isn't that level of research done by the client at the beginning. So they get months into the process and they're like, wait a second, you're not doing this. I thought you were going to do this thing for me, architects. Right. And then they have to pivot.
Yeah, we've had, people reaching out. They were in framing of remodeling their home and they have never seen a 3D view, interior 3D model of their house. And they had no idea, the door was going to be there or this was going to look like that. We're like, well, that's why you need to really find out, like in the price you're paying whoever you're hiring for your project, what are you getting? What are you going to see throughout the process to make sure that when construction starts, you feel comfortable with what's going to be built? I think that's the worst feeling for a homeowner is to spend all that time and money and then construction happens and everybody's super excited. And then you realize that you actually have no idea what's being built because you've only seen those floor plans you can barely understand because it's very abstract. Right. And then there is this whole three-dimensionality of the design that's completely missing. And you're finding out about it when it's kind of too late. So I think
you don't want to find out during framing.
Like that's no. And I worked in the construction industry for quite a few years, as the office administrator and doing the bookkeeping, and the change orders are a nightmare.
Change orders.
Yeah. Change orders are a nightmare. And I know that a lot of homeowners don't realize that when there's a change order, it costs extra. So if you don't want that door on that wall and it has to move, that's a change because it takes, maybe the materials might not be extra, but the time to take the door off and move it, that costs extra. So, having that transparency with architects and also with you guys, having that relationship with the GC, with, and offering this 3D print, not a 3D print, but a 3D rendering of their project does give the homeowner more of a better idea of, am I going to have the morning sun or the afternoon sun or, and kind of switching that around and really being transparent. I don't know a lot of architects that are that transparent. So you guys got my referral.
The change orders is a very specific, but a really good point. That's basically what it comes down to. So look, everyone wants things to go efficiently, on schedule, on budget, and be as cost effective as possible to meet their goals. And the way you do that in creating a house is you spend a little more money up front, meaning during the design and documentation phases with the architect, to then save during construction. Right. Because if we can have if you hire an architect, you're paying them the appropriate fee to do all of the work that's, like we've talked about, it's going to help ensure that during construction, you already know what it's going to look like. And the contractor can just build and they can move quickly and efficiently. And that's really the best way. It's when the construction documents done by the low-level architect, who's oftentimes not even licensed, is missing a bunch of information even, then the contractors in the field are like, I don't know what to do. That takes time and coordination. Or the contractor says, hey, that wasn't in the drawings. client, so I'm going to hit you with the change order because that
Yep.
was not in the drawings. And so that's also where it's like I know for clients it sounds it's sometimes painful to think like, okay, I'm going to pay this architect all this money, but you're doing it really to help yourself preserve a future state of construction where it's not 3x the price, 4x the price, and also you're blowing out the schedule. And that's really been the best way to do it. So much so, I know a lot of contractors who are like, hey, I've worked with bad architects. We've actually started to like have our own architects in-house to draw stuff because we know it's better for us to draw it than to do it in the field.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I've heard that some GCs will use CAD or other programs. And from what I understand, CAD is just a nightmare and a half to use. But, having a professional architect being able to do that in an office, it just seems more, like you said, it's more efficient. It's probably more precise, and it's just more efficient all around. So, yeah. People change their mind all the time. And I think it would be easier to work with an architect rather than a general contractor because you're not running construction crews that might be running late for the next job that they're supposed to start. So, having architects on your team is a very good choice for homeowners out there who are listening. Get an architect or at least talk to one if you don't have an idea. Yeah. So I want to thank David and Marina for joining us and sharing their expertise. And they have their own podcast called the Second Studio Podcast. And can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast? What kind of conversations do you have on that podcast?
Yeah, we have all kinds of conversation. That really is one size fit all. I feel like it could satisfy a lot of audience. We have quite a few series. So if you go to our website, secondstudiopod.com, you'll see we have interviews where we interview other architects who do work that we really admire. So we sit down with them for about an hour and a half and just kind of like talk about, their life and how they got to where they are. We have fellow designers episodes. These are more for either architecture students or fellow professionals who are looking to, maybe work on their portfolio or kind of like, get better at something, or we talk about more like in-house, type of conversation. We have project companions. These are more for clients or homeowners who are trying to understand how do architects work, what professionals should I be hiring. Yeah. We have a whole series that kind of talks about the biggest topics for people who are not architects, who are trying to kind of, understand how that works. And then we also have after hours, where it's basically just the two of us, talking about whatever comes to mind on a Friday evening, not necessarily about architecture or design. So this could be pretty random sometimes, but also very entertaining.
That's awesome. And so for the future, what innovations or trends excite you the most about the future of residential architecture?
You've probably heard this, of course, but AI is the big thing that everyone is just talking about.
No.
Just like, there's this new thing, AI,
Really?
I actually think what's going to happen with AI and architecture. Well, first of all, architecture and construction are two industries that are historically very slow to adapt new things. So it's going to take some time for AI to really hit us. But what I think it's going to do is that it's going to separate out the architects who do, I would consider, proper custom houses from architects who are more or less just copying what they see on Pinterest. Because an architect who operates that way, which there are plenty, to kind of just regurgitate something that already exists, right. That's what AI already does. And so it's going to take some time for AI to develop to that degree, but I think it will take place. And I think what's going to happen is that for the clients and the architects who really want something like very specific to them and have that personal relationship, you're still going to have architects for I say again, proper custom residences. The other reality is that for AI, like what we do is so complex in construction that AI will probably hit a wall when it gets to the technical side of what we do.
I think there is a misconception that AI is going to replace the architect as a designer, right? As a sculptor. But I think AI I don't think it would be able to do that because of all the reasons and things we've mentioned. I think AI would step into our industry to help us make some of those tasks a bit more efficient, but not necessarily on the design front, more in like the project management or even client presentation or meeting notes. So, kind of like the all of the many things we have to do on project that isn't necessarily designed, which I'm very excited about because that means it would free my time to actually do more of the design and less of those, million tasks that we have to do. So
Right.
I'm not really concerned that AI is going to start designing the best architecture out there. I think there is just so many things that need to, as we know, there's so many steps that need to take place for a project to go from the first sketch to handing the keys to the client that I think AI is far from being able to do it all.
Yeah, and I think that in any industry, it doesn't matter what it is, we all need that human connection. And we want to all be heard and understood. And I don't think that AI is going to completely take over the world, like some people say. And like you said, that there's so many steps involved with planning and designing that AI is just not going to be able to do that. So, yeah.
It's going to be tough. It's also not to go down to this rabbit hole of AI, but there's the question of even if AI is able to spit out some nice looking image, is that any good? Or is it just, again, regurgitating things that are trendy? And I think that is one of the things we've seen fairly consistently is every client wants a house that feels timeless in a certain degree. And there's a lot of thinking that goes into creating a house that is like that. And I think that's something that's going to be consistent. I think clients also want more and more privacy in the residences. Houses are thought about now almost like private, tranquil retreats to rejuvenate, which they are anyway, but they're really more thought about this way, to feel secure, private, and to reflect and to rest and restore, and then have friends over it and whatnot. But I think that's also a shift in what it means to have a house that has taken place the last 5 years or whatever, and will continue to be the case.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Couldn't put it into better words. So again, I want to thank David and Marina for joining us, sharing their expertise and their stories. And I want to remind the audience to follow Fame Architecture and Interior Design. Check out the Second Studio podcast. They're on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, secondstudiopod.com. They're on Instagram, YouTube, all of the things. We'll have the links below. You can also find their link on our website, Sonoma North Bay Home Expo, under the podcast link. And I want to thank you so much, David and Marina, for coming on to the Home Expo podcast. And we look forward to hearing about how all of your projects are going. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And remember to subscribe, follow, share. We're on all the things, and we'll see you soon. Bye.